Do you ever struggle to book the right guests for your podcast? Or maybe you're getting guests, but even the ones with the big followings aren't moving the needle. If this sounds familiar, this is for you. Alex Sanfilippo, founder of PodMatch and host of Podcasting Made Simple, joins me today to share his expert insights on what kind of guests you should be looking for to grow your podcast, how to reach out to guests and not get ignored, the hidden reasons why guests say no, which elements to focus on first if you want to improve your podcast, how to keep guests engaged so they don't ghost you, and much more. So if you want to start booking guests who are perfect for your audience and also that are going to grow your podcast, then this is for you. Alex Sanfilippo, thank you for joining me on Podcasting Amplified.
Joe, thank you so much for having me today.
You're very welcome. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what would you say is the number one thing that podcasters need to look out for when it comes to choosing guests?
Joe, this is the right question to open up with because the why behind what we do is just so important. I don't think enough people think about this. I'm really glad, and it's a gift that you start off with this question because I think some people just want to be like, okay, tell me what to do and how to do it. But again, the question being like, what is the number one thing when I should be looking for a guest, when I'm booking somebody and choosing that right person? To me, it comes down to really making sure that we are thinking about our listeners when we're picking our guest as podcast host. And what I mean by that is, what transformation are your listeners trusting you to help them with? So everyone starts listening to your podcast for a specific reason. That specific reason, they expect to get a result from it, or they're going to stop listening if they don't. So when you're thinking about the guest to bring on, you need to be asking yourself, does this guest help my listener with that transformation that they are seeking and the reason they're trusting me in the first place? That to me is the absolute number one most important thing. And just to kind of repeat that one more time, the right guest matters. It's not always the most popular guest. It may not even be the most well-spoken guest, but it's the guest that helps the best with that transformation that your listener is seeking. And it's why, once again, that listener listens in the first place.
Awesome. Thank you. And I noticed there that you didn't say anything about, the number of followers they have, anything like that. And I think that's something that for some podcasters is the number one, or at least they're trying to get a balance. Could you paint me a picture? Like, if you could imagine a podcaster who has all the guests that you've just explained, so somebody who's perfectly targeted to their ideal listener, who knows exactly what to say, what the answers to the questions to get that transformation for their ideal listener. So somebody who, they have those kind of guests every episode, but maybe those guests don't have much of a following at all, compared with a podcaster who isn't too fussed about sort of what the guest is saying, but they're just looking for those people who have, 10, 20, 30,000 followers on Instagram, getting thousands of downloads per month. What would you imagine would be the difference in growth between those two podcasts?
So to me, first and foremost, I kind of call this type of podcast like the audience chaser. They're just looking to get that spike in their numbers. And here's the thing, even if you can somehow manage to bring on like a very popular individual that agrees to share it, which by the way is like, it's kind of like winning the lottery sometimes. Like most of the people that hit a certain threshold, they have a big following because they only share what they know is going to help their audience, much like what I'm telling podcast hosts to do. So the chances of them sharing it are already pretty slim. But let's just imagine you find that guest with millions of followers and they agree they're going to share it, and they share it in a way that brings people to your podcast. Here's the thing, the people that come because of that episode came only for that guest, not for the host. Now, I'm not saying people won't stick around, but most of them are going to say, wow, that was so great. Joe did such a good job on Alex's podcast. I'll just keep on following Joe, right? Because they showed up because of that person that they already follow and already like. And so you get this weird spike in your stats that go way up for that one episode and then way down. I guess some podcast hosts get really addicted to looking at the total download number, but that's not really telling you much. So to me, like if you're just looking to get total downloads up, like what value is that really adding? And are you kind of working the system, which in my mind is bringing on the wrong people that have a big following that might share so you can get a spike, versus adding continuous value? I guess the best way I can describe this, Joe, is it's like taking the stairs instead of the elevator. It takes a lot more time to get there, but at the end of it, you've developed a muscle that the other people who took the elevator have not developed. And so for me, with my show, I never look at following. I don't even mind if people have social media or not. Or as a matter of fact, I don't even ask my guests to share it. Ask them, if you know one person, can you share it with the one person that you think needs this episode today? Slow and steady wins the race. But for me, what I've realized is that transformation that I help my listeners with is so much more valuable because they hang around, they stay, and they kind of quote unquote do the dirty work for me. They're telling their friends about it when they feel like they receive something from it. like all humans, like we want to share good stuff. They go out there and share it. They tell other people about it. For me, that is more what I look at versus looking at the overall numbers that somebody might have. And I don't know. I just think that's a metric that we have to get out of our minds as podcasters. And I get that we want people to listen, but if we just gain the proper perspective of how powerful podcasting is on some individual's life, I think we can kind of put some of that behind us with the big numbers.
Yeah. So basically, if you're looking for those like numbers, then potentially there's that initial spike. But for actual long-term growth, you want to find those people that can make that transformation happen.
For me, actually, I have a great example of this. I had, I'll leave the people nameless, but I had a marketer on my podcast. He's very well known and tens of millions of followers. And he shared the episode and even linked to it from his website, which was a gift for me. And it was like a dream to have that conversation. That podcast episode did pretty well. And then over the next week, I had somebody on who was his first podcast ever. I don't even know if he had any social media accounts. We didn't link to any of them. He didn't share it. Perfectly fine. But when I looked at how those two podcast episodes trended over a 6 months period, the episode with the person who wasn't known was more than double outperforming the one with the celebrity, more or less. And in my mind, I was new to podcasting. I was like, how is this? This makes no sense. Like, how did this happen? And the reality is, I went back to the content from the individual at Urban on Podcast was absolutely perfectly aligned with who I said I serve. And the numbers reflected it over time. Now, immediately, apples for apples, like on the first day it launched, obviously the celebrities podcast episode did a lot better than the new guy. But over time, that's the one that got shared. That's the one that stuck with people. That's the one people were emailing me about, asking more about, can you tell me more about this topic? I was able to build that connection. So I think that as you simplified it, Joe, like you said it beautifully, like it's a long-term gain to be able to just say, hey, I'm gonna have the right people on my show.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are some podcasts around, like from big stars like Louis Theroux, talk show hosts, Joe Rogan, people like that, where the number of followers, they want to get those big celebrities on because people will watch just for that celebrity. But I can't imagine that any of the listeners at the moment have a podcast like that. Like, you're not chasing global celebrities. So yeah, it's not really relevant in that situation. So I'd say the next question would be actually finding these guests. And we work with clients, and that's kind of one of their biggest challenges, really. We're trying to work on a solution for that, but like actually finding the right guests that can answer these questions, because it's easier to find the ones with the bigger numbers because you see them around, and you can be swayed by their big numbers thinking, oh, they must be worth speaking to. But how can you actually find these people that know the right information, that have the right kind of demeanor for your audience and things like that?
Yeah, first off, neither of us are saying, for everyone listening today, neither of us, me or Joe, are saying that like you shouldn't have someone on just because they have a big following. Like sometimes it aligns, and it's like that is the person you should have on. Just don't let that be your deciding factor of if this person should be on or not. Like, pick the right person versus the right numbers. So neither Joe or I are saying that like, hey, yeah, don't have big names on or don't have people with big followings. Like, you can, they just have to be the right ones. But again, don't let that be your deciding factor. To me, this all really comes back down to the host knowing their audience, so their avatar, right? So just their fictitious, like, this is who listens to my podcast, which is tied directly to their why. Like, we have to have a big purpose behind what we're doing. And it's got to go beyond just growing podcast numbers, right? I think so many of us are like, monetize my podcast, grow my podcast. Like, that's what I want to do. We got to go beyond that. And it's got to go much deeper than that. Like, why did you start it in the first place? I think is always a great question to ask. Like, if you're 5 episodes in, 10, 20, 100, 1,000, like, it doesn't really matter where you're at. Stop and ask yourself, like, why did I do this in the first place? Like, what was the real reason behind this? And if it lacks depth, do some soul searching and deepen that depth, and then say, okay, this is why I'm doing this, and this is who it serves. Again, that's that avatar. When you know this, we can start now really deciding who the right guests are. And Joe, there's so many tools out there now that can help with finding this stuff. So I'm not going to go through like a whole list of them, but social media search is getting really good now. It went through like a really bad dip when AI first came on the radar, but now it's getting pretty intelligent. You can find people through LinkedIn is probably, in my mind, the best option. I guess I think more business. So for me, that seems like it makes the most sense. But AI can help you locate people as well. Like, there's all kinds of ways to do it. And there's all kinds of directory services out there as well for podcasters. Like I happen to run one myself where you can actually go to these websites that are specifically for connecting guests and hosts for interviews. And a lot of them will do some of the matching for you. Any of these type of things I think are going to help a lot. And as podcasters, we need to remove the friction from this is what my listener wants to the whole search process. That's what we need to try to eliminate to now let's get this interview going, right? Like that time spent in the middle there doesn't actually serve anybody. So you want to really cut down that as much as you possibly can.
Thank you. And yeah, like Alex mentioned, and like I mentioned in the intro, Alex is the founder of PodMatch, which is a platform that helps match hosts with guests. And just to be clear, I don't have some kind of referral link in the show notes or anything like that. I genuinely use PodMatch to help find guests, and I've used alternatives like Matchmaker and things like that. PodMatch just happens to be the one that I landed on that's been the most useful. So you have some insight, obviously, or a lot of insight into the inner workings of this platform. Have you seen any kind of trends, or like, do you know what can help people to reach out to these people? So if they find the right guest that they really want on their podcast, obviously in PodMatch you can send them a message, but wherever you find them and wherever you send that message, humans are humans. They're going to react to certain messages and ignore other ones. So do you have a way that you see works when people try and convince someone to get on their show?
Yeah. First off, thank you for mentioning PodMatch. And we developed the message system specifically for that, because if a host and a guest is there, it means they want to have a conversation. So we built the message system for that. It's like, hey, they're both already kind of opting in. So if you're using PodMatch, it kind of doesn't really come up that way, but I still think you need to have a good message. So whether it's an email, a social media direct message, whatever it is that you're using, like it needs to be good. My first thought here, and I think that a lot of people want to skip this one, Joe, but we have to meet people where they are and how they like to be reached out to. An example of this is I have a friend who he's a podcaster and he goes on podcasts as a guest a lot. He was a professional footballer, as you might know, but as I know, it's soccer. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people want him on the show, but he literally says in his bio on all of his social platforms, I do not check my email, nor do I ever respond to an email ever. And so he's like very proud of the fact that he hasn't responded to an email in like 15 years. Like he just doesn't check it. He has an email address. And I have people being like, hey, how do you know this guy, Alex? Like I've emailed him 10 times. He won't respond to anything. And I'm like, it says everywhere he is not going to check or respond to his email. I'm like, so no matter how good your message is to him, like your email to him, he's never going to see it because he doesn't want to be communicated with that way. I happen to know he's very, very active on WhatsApp specifically. And he puts his WhatsApp number everywhere. So I'm like, download WhatsApp and send him the same message you tried to email him there. I'm saying this because it's so important that we meet our guest where they like to be met and how they like to be communicated with. And another example would be if somebody is a guest that you want on your show and they are always doing like selfie videos on social media, right? Like maybe they're using Instagram. They're always posting their story all day long. Send them a selfie type video in the DMs. They clearly like that form of content. So make the ask in the way that they like to receive it. I think that first and foremost, before we even get to the messaging of it, it's got to be in the right place. Now, the messaging itself, I always say to keep it short. Keep it short and lead with value. I think that those are really big things that you can do. We don't want it to be too long-winded. We want it to lead with value, which is basically first and foremost acknowledging who they are in a very brief way. It doesn't need to be too much, but you don't want to go straight into, hey, I want you on my podcast because I like how many followers you have, and I think my listeners will like you. They heard me, and I, right? Mm-hmm. Like you want to say, hey, you've done a really phenomenal job and I am noticing it. And I think my listeners could get a lot from it. The last thing I'll mention here is to make a meaningful request. You want to make it meaningful. So you don't want to just be like, I want you on my podcast. Give them more than that. Like, why do you want them on your podcast? If you can tell them specifically why you want them on our podcast, you're separating yourself from everyone else who's saying, hey, I want you on my show. Because that's what most people will go in and say. And like, I got a podcast, I want you on it. I want you on my show to talk about how you post on social media 30 times a day and you're not overwhelmed. And how do you do that consistently? Now that tells, I guess, ooh, I love doing that. I love that conversation. 100% I'm in. I think if we can get these few things really right, starting with how we communicate with them, but also making sure that we keep it short, we lead with value, we make a meaningful request, we can do really well in our outreach to guests.
Nice. And I like how you managed to fit that into a 3-part plan. I think the number 3 is always
I know that you like 3-part plans.
Yeah.
I listened to your last solo episode you did, Joe, recently, and I was like, you got 3 points in there. I'm a 3-point guy too. So I was like, all right, Joe's speaking my language here.
So it's, meet them where they are, keep it short and make a meaningful request. And I totally feel that with the meet them where they are thing, because I think, again, people focusing sometimes too much on the numbers. Like, their primary goal is just to get as many requests out as possible. And because of that, they're not really reading into anything. So, I mean, I generally turn off my inbound inquiries on PodMatch for interview requests, because on Podcasting Amplified, I only interview people who are podcasters, so host their own podcast. And most of the inbound requests I get across all platforms, a lot of the time it's like, I really think I can give you some value to your podcast, but they're not podcasters. So they obviously haven't read that part of it, which is kind of the first criteria.
Podcasting Amplified. I wouldn't know what that's about either. I think, wait, your title of your show literally says The Podcast for Podcasters, right? If I'm not mistaken, that's like in there. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. People will always just kind of bypass that, unfortunately.
Yeah. And they don't really stand out, do they?
No, they do not.
So as I'm talking about podcast, people who host their own podcast, you host your own podcast, Podcasting Made Simple. And how did this start? Like, which came first, the podcast or PodMatch? And how did you get into the space?
Yeah, I actually started with a different podcast many years ago. I mean, I got to go back to 2014. My very first one was a very quick failed attempt. I think I did 5 episodes and was like, I don't understand if anyone can even see this. I tried another one very quick after that. One was faith-based. Like, I'm a follower of Jesus, so like I wanted to talk about that. And then after that, fast forward a couple more years, I actually sold a blog that included that. So I was like, oh, I used to have a podcast, now I don't. I want another one. And then that's when I finally started like my first like breakout show, if you will. It was called Creating a Brand. And the whole idea was like the art of creating a brand. It was an interview-based show where I had different experts on just talking about how they left a 9-to-5 job to become a full-time entrepreneur. That came years before PodMatch, but I learned how to create a company like PodMatch by learning from the guests I had on that show. Like, I didn't mean to be the avatar or the person that was going to learn the most from it, but I feel like I got more out of that podcast than anyone ever did. And I actually, now my show is called Podcasting Made Simple, but it's the same feed. So like the first 158 episodes, it's hard to remember that number. I think that's what it is. First 158 episodes are creating a brand, and it will say creating a brand. And then after that, it turned into Podcasting Made Simple. So I just kept the same feed because I was like, I want to document this along the way. But to answer your question, the podcast came first. And then years after I had started PodMatch, so I saw a need for the educational wing of podcasting. And there at that point, there was like, your show wasn't, I don't believe your show was around yet. There wasn't very many podcasts that were about podcasting that were active. So I was like, there's a need here. My audience is asking for it. And it was just time to sunset the entrepreneurship side of the show and get into podcasting, about podcasting.
Yeah. And you did something a little bit different to, presumably, to get it to stand out, which is, well, do you want to explain kind of this interesting format that you have of these sort of live presentations that turn into episodes?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to, this is probably our call to action at the end of the episode as well, everybody. But I encourage you, like, this is how you can see exactly what we're doing. If you go to podmatch.com/EP/319, this is actually Joe on my podcast in the exact format that I'm about to explain. So that's podmatch.com/EP/319. And I'll probably mention it later on as well. A phenomenal episode, like really well done. The whole idea of the show was I wanted to give very short practical advice to podcast guests and podcast hosts, because PodMatch serves both of them, in a way that there's not even a conversation happening. It's just like, this is exactly how you achieve this. And so like Joe talked about how to achieve home studio quality audio and video without breaking the bank. So it's just like, here's how you look and sound amazing without needing to spend money like you would on a professional studio. And that was great for both podcast guests and hosts. And to this day, I still get people complimenting it. They're like, "Oh, this is exactly what I needed." And so we just wanted the education that people were asking for. So again, it's more like a TED Talk, I guess, Joe, is the best way to say it. So it's like a TEDx talk. I'm not there. And what we do is we grab 13 different videos from different experts. I always share one. So it's like quarterly. So we do this 4 times a year. And then we host a live virtual event. All these videos are pre-recorded. So we stream them day of, but we also bring the speaker there live that day. So they stream their 12 to 15 minute video, and then they're there live for the next 15 minutes doing live Q&A with anyone from our community that's there. I hope that makes sense to everybody. It's kind of hard for me to articulate and explain. I've not gotten great at that yet, but we just want it to be more of an experience. We want it to be very, very community driven while also being like a live way to learn together. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you agree, probably, because it's kind of the whole point, but there are quite a few criteria for people to become part of it. It's not like anyone can just, jump in. That there are kind of rules that you need to follow. You need to do your sort of talk in a certain way, film it in a certain way, cover a certain type of topic, and then be there for the live event itself. Has that made it difficult for you to find the right guests, and how do you generally find the right people for it?
I'd answer your question really quick. It's extremely difficult to find people for it. Like I just kind of explained, a TEDx talk it's similar to that. Like if anyone here who's checking this out today has ever listened or watched a TEDx talk, there's no call to action in it. There's one topic being covered, and you go really deep on that topic, and that person shares about it in a very unique and helpful way. That's what we're looking for. So there's no like, hey, here's how I've gone from A to Z in my podcast. It's like, no, here's how I went from B to C specifically, and exactly tactfully what I did to be able to level up at that point, instead of the holistic approach. Most people who reach out, and even people who submit videos, they just seem to miss it. And then they share like, well, I got started this date, and here was the first lesson I learned. Here was the second lesson I learned. Here's the third lesson. I'm like, no, that's not what we want. We want one thing, really deep, the one thing that makes you a rock star. So it has been very difficult to find people for the podcast. I still post about it on social media every quarter, like looking for it. So that's been one way of being able to bring people in. But the mass majority of people I've had on the show have come directly through PodMatch. Listen, I don't mean to promote my own service. The way the matching works just connects with people that do have the experience I'm looking for. And typically, I now look for people who have successfully done a TEDx or comparable type talk because they get it. If I say this is just like a TED Talk, but it's for a podcast guest or host, do you want to do it? They're not like, okay, what is that? They're like, oh yeah, I just did that. I can do this, right? So I've been kind of narrowing it down. PodMatch has made it really easy. Again, I do post it everywhere as well, but I have to say, I think it's probably about 85, maybe even closer to 90% of people come directly from the platform itself now.
Yeah. Well, I remember I saw a post back when it was called Twitter on there, and then I reached out to you on there, and then. Yeah, I remember receiving an email from your team the other day, actually, about potentially some more ideas for maybe jumping back in. So I need to spend some time, see if I can put something together.
Yeah, that was actually me directly. I looked at our most favored talks we've ever had on there, and yours was on the list. So I was like, I know Joe. I was like, I'm going to email him. So again, kudos to you for doing such a good job, and thank you for adding value to my community the way you have. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's given me even more incentive now, especially that you've said how difficult it can be to find the right people. So for anyone listening who's having these same kind of challenges with finding the right guest, let's say they're already sending messages with those that cover those 3 points, like you've already said. They're not chasing the numbers, they're finding the right people, and they're just not getting people agreeing. Do you think it could be to do with their podcast? Maybe it's not sort of set up, maybe it doesn't sound right. What are the first things that people should think about or look into in their own podcast that could maybe be signs of why guests aren't willing to come on?
I love this question, and I think that it's an immediate red flag if guests aren't wanting to come on. Now, granted, if you cover a topic that's really taboo, or you have a weird format like I do, it makes more sense. But if your podcast is something that's more specific yet beneficial to people, and people are saying no, then there might be a problem, and that is your first indication that, hey, I might need to change something. The very first thing I'd say is if you reach out to me to be a guest on your show, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at your show. And the first thing that I see before I even listen is going to be your cover art. That's the first impression that you're going to have, just like the cover of a book. I know everyone says don't judge a book by its cover. I always judge books by their cover. And I think we all do, right? Like I look at the cover, and if the cover doesn't look like something interesting to me, I don't want to confirm if I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I want the opposite. I want to confirm that I am interested. So for me, there's an example. Someone asked me to be on their show, and all it was like a really terrible close-up selfie of their face. And he immediately kind of like, I don't know if I want my name next to that, right? Listen, I'm not trying to be mean. They weren't like bad looking people. It was just like they clearly gave it zero thought, and it's like they cut off half their face anyway. Like, what is this? I don't know if I'm sure I responded, because I always respond. But I probably just said, hey, I'm kind of overwhelmed on this side of things anyway. I don't know what I said, but I only said that without even doing any other research. I just could tell from that very first thing I didn't want to do it. Now, most of them, that's not the case. Typically, I get further along than that. It's okay. The cover art looks good. The title's good. But then I start looking at the content, the episodes, and if I can't find a theme or trend in it that makes sense in a way that I'd be able to share, then once again, it's no. So if it goes from like talking about soccer to talking about the weather to talking about your favorite book to how to start a business to how to be a podcaster, like all these random like lifestyle type things that is a very general interest, that also turns me off a little bit, because I don't want to be included in a broad group of different topics. I want to go places where it's specific. Like a perfect example, Joe, when you reached out to me about being on Podcasting Amplified, you reached out exactly the way I say to reach out. You kept it really short. You added some value in it, right? You made a meaningful request. And I could look at the show and the brand, and instantly, I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to listen to it. I did listen to it, by the way, Joe. But like, I didn't have to know that, yeah, I want to be on that show. The last thing I'll mention, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, Joe, but I'm going to look at if it's a video-based show, like video audio, I'm going to look at the video side. If it's just audio, I'm going to go listen. If I want to like confirm deeper into it, right? If it's like, okay, it's not directly on podcast, or maybe it's good, I'm going to listen for the host quality. Are the guest and the host speaking at the same level? Because I've heard some shows where I'm in the car, I turn it up when the host talks, I turn it down when the guest talks. And that's like a bad experience for listeners. I imagine listeners won't hang around long, even with things like that. Like we kind of have to be proud of the quality that we have these days. These are some of the things I listen to that help me decide if I want to be on a show or not. And I think that, again, if guests are saying no, if they're not responding positively to being on your show, then you need to look at some of these elements. And Joe, I'm sure I missed a ton of things, and I know that you can share even more on that, but those are my initial thoughts when you said that.
Yeah, for sure. Like the judging a book by its cover thing. I mean, I do podcast audits at the moment. It's this sort of offer that I'm trying, just free podcast audits to give people like 3 to 5 things so that they can, figure out where these problems lie. And the cover art is often the first one. Like you say, people do judge a book by its cover, and there's no good thinking, oh, well, they shouldn't be so quick to dismiss it. They should listen. People have no attention spans. But I think people they're being served so much content now by all these channels. You kind of have to be quick at making a decision on if something's worth listening to, and that cover art, is a big factor. Like you see some which are just, like you say, a selfie or a photo or a logo, or it doesn't even have the podcast name on. So I agree that that's the number one thing, and then the audio quality, because people don't want to sound bad or look bad. So if they think they're not going to be edited and their audio quality is going to make them, look a lot worse than their current brand already does, then it's a definite no.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think that these are things that as podcasters we have to look at. And I think that maybe 5 to 8 years ago, the mid 2010s, like, I don't know if that mattered as much, but we're at the point now where like you said, Joe, there's so many options and there's so many people doing it at high quality that it's become our expectation is it's going to sound good. And I want it to be a positive experience from start to finish as a listener. And so I'm looking at that, thinking about that before I say yes to being on a podcast.
Awesome. Now, let's say our listeners, they've got the guest booked, but they're having trouble retaining them. So they book a guest and then they just don't show up, or they cancel last minute, and then they're sort of left with no episode and have to skip or whatever. Do you have any tips around that? Like, 1, what people should do to prevent that from being a disaster? And 2, is there anything podcasters can do to prevent people sort of disappearing or losing interest before the day? Or maybe it's just around finding the right guest. Maybe they're not finding the right guest.
Yeah, my initial thing I'm going to share here is not helpful. So stand by, everybody. But have a backlog. I know if you're already in this situation, it's like telling somebody who's bleeding not to fall again, right? Like if they fell and got hurt, like it's not the advice that helps in that moment. But if you can, like, start thinking proactively now and get ahead so that if this does happen, which it will, listen, there's been times where I've had people not show up and they had like something tragic happen, like in their family's life. They had to go. Like I can't expect them to be there. And I always try to have grace if someone doesn't show up, assuming that, man, something's probably actually really wrong. Like I think they look like reliable people. Have a backlog, I think, is really important. So you're not creating like just in time content, because I find that the content we create can be a lot better if it isn't needed tomorrow. So, and Joe, I know that you practice this, you preach this as well. Like your quality is so good and you help so many people level up their quality, but you don't want someone submitting it to you right now to be published tomorrow. Like, you want some time so you can make it really amazing and stand out. So that's my first thing. Again, that might not be helpful, but if you do book with somebody and you're finding people aren't showing up, once it's happened 2 or 3 times, I always tell podcast hosts, look within first, look at your system. Are they getting reminders? Did it end up on their calendar? Was it clear what it was about? And I'm not saying be annoying. Don't email them every day or anything like that, right? But send some reminders. And a great example of that, Joe, like there was no chance I could have missed this today because I have gotten reminders ever since I booked. And again, it wasn't every day, but it was helpful. It told me exactly how to show up, exactly when to show up, exactly how to show up. Like I knew all of that leading up to it. Last week I was on a podcast. There was no communication except for our first email back and forth. And this was one I did off of PodMatch. I don't really do that much anymore, but I just went against my better judgment and did it. They did create a calendar invite from a different email address than how we were communicating. They didn't put their name on it. It just said an interview. It was all it said. And there was no place to go, nothing like that. It was just like pure chance that I like remembered the person's name, found their email and said, where are we supposed to be? Oh, sorry, I forgot to send you the link. I would have pulled a no-show and I probably very easily could. So I always tell hosts, first and foremost, look within. So like if I'm inviting someone to be a guest on my show, I say, you are being like literally it's a little over the top. I literally would say Joe being interviewed by Alex on Podcasting Made Simple. Like I would put that as the title of it and have all the details right there in the calendar invite. Like no way that there's like questions about it. So I think that the first thing to do is look within. If you are using a tool like PodMatch, we do, and there's other tools that do this as well. They kind of show people's reliability score. So like if a guest has not shown up to multiple interviews, it warns you of that. So you can be prepared. If it doesn't say anything, it means they've never missed an interview, which is helpful to know as well, right? But just see how someone communicates. So if you're using social media, you're using the DMs, are they giving you one-word responses? Are they really engaging with it? Does it take them 4 days to get back to anything you ask? Like these are going to be signs that someone might be unreliable or might be a little bit scattered, right? You want to make sure that you're communicating well about it and looking at how they're responding to that, because that will give you a tell if they're going to make it or not. Joe, I don't know what advice to give someone when someone doesn't show up and you need the episode, though. I don't know if you have any idea around that, because I really don't today.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you said about the backlog. Like, just for reference, we're recording this episode on 10th of July, and it will probably be published around end of August, especially because the school summer holidays are coming up and my son will be home, so I avoid doing recording around that time. So I'm just batching a bunch, and I know some people are in the same situation. There's only one time when it really came down to the wire where I think I just didn't have enough booked in and had a couple of cancellations. In that situation, it was the first ever Podcasting Amplified solo episode. So if anyone's wondering why there was a random solo episode in there, it was because of that. But it has made me think maybe I should do more solo episodes as well. So, silver linings and all that. But yeah, I mean, do you have any kind of criteria on like how many chances you give? Like if someone is a no-show, will you give them one more chance or two? Does it depend on the situation?
It definitely depends on the situation. If there wasn't a good reason, I just don't circle back to it. Like I had one person not show up, even confirmed like the night before. And then apparently he went out and partied like super hard. And then like his email was like 2 hours after this interview. He's like, hey man, sorry about that. I was like super hungover. Let me know if you want to reschedule. Mm-hmm. And I just said, hey, like appreciate it. Maybe we'll circle back later. And just decided no, because like that clearly shows that like it wasn't a priority. Like for me, knowing I had this interview today, like I prepped starting last night to make sure that like I wasn't out late, wasn't messing up my voice so I show up bad, right? Like I want people to have that level of respect as well, because we're here to serve not each other even, but the listeners. And I want to show up the best I can for them. And I want guests that do the same thing. And so that's a situation where it's just kind of like, no, but I've had other people be like, hey, and they're very respectful. Something came up, I have to cancel. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And the next day, if they're like, hey, I'm so sorry, I had a family emergency, I'd love to get this rescheduled, I am totally down for that. Granted, if it happens again, maybe I wouldn't be, but I've never had it happen twice like that. So yeah, I give grace where it makes sense. I have some discernment. I encourage all hosts to be that way. Don't let a guest kind of like pull you around. Remember, it's your platform. You're really in control of that. And your job is to protect yourself and your listeners more than cater to each and every person who might want to drag you around a little bit and you work around their schedule. Like, just remember that the platform is yours.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's kind of changed a little bit recently. Generally now it's like everybody gets one chance, like as in one chance to miss the interview and then come back with a reason. And I'm not saying, occasionally, very occasionally, it is kind of disrespectful, as in like what you've said, they've been out partying, or if they come back with, oh, sorry, I just, I booked a call with such and such instead, like basically telling you, I found that this person is more valuable than you are. And that's kind of okay, well, we can leave that there. But most of the time, I just I give them the benefit of the doubt. Like everyone has sort of different things, but now just for the sake of time, I would politely decline a second rebooking. I think, no shade or anything, but just for the sake of making sure that things can run smoothly. I think if they miss one, fine, but then the second time, it's probably best we don't go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna start calling you Joe the Merciful. Look at you, man, giving those chances.
No, I've given one too many before in the past, but yeah, normally there's a good reason, and I like to think that I always think like if ever this happens to me, I would like someone to be merciful, but at the same time, I haven't missed an interview yet, so
I did miss one time. If we're going to tell these stories, and it's still since I started PodMatch, I have missed 2 meetings ever. One was a podcast interview, and one was a phone call. They were back to back on some random Thursday, and I'm typically like I always look at my calendar, always look at my physical to do list. And that day, I was just in the zone and just worked straight through them. And I apologized hours later. I never got a chance to go back on that podcast, which totally makes sense. The call we rescheduled, but to this date, I remember both those things because they happened the same day, back to back, early on. So my confession there is that, like, life happens sometimes. Like, and I like to think I'm a fairly reliable person. I remember the fact that I had those 2 problems. That should say something, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like, we're all human. I'm sure it's gonna be the case for me at some point. It's some holiday soon. We're trying to move house at the moment. It's like all these things. Sometimes you just kind of let it go. Do you have any tool other than PodMatch? Do you have any tools that you use to make this process smoother? Like I know you talked about booking services and things.
Yeah, so I like Calendly to help with like the actual booking itself. Although cal.com is an alternative that I've seen that I might actually suggest people go to first. I'm not affiliated with either of these companies; they're just what I use. But cal.com, if you're a podcast host, to allow guests to book in your calendar, so you're not playing like calendar battleship, where it's like, what time works for you? What day works for you? Right? Like, let them schedule on your calendar, and you can build in a bunch of really great automations to send the reminders, to give them the link of where to record, like everything. Like it works really well, so it can take it completely off of your chest. And I think that that's really, really a great thing. I also think the studio really matters. And what I mean by the studio, like if you're doing a remote interview like Joe and I are doing right now, having a space that's really high quality works. So we're using Squadcast today. I use Riverside. They're fairly comparable. I think it's just a matter of what kind of gels with like your personality, I guess, and like what makes sense to you. But I like those high quality ones because as soon as the guest shows up, it's like rolling out the red carpet for them. Like they know they're getting into a really premium studio, and it does capture really great audio and video, both of them. And I suggest that, like, you want the whole experience from the time they book on the calendar to seeing exactly when and where it is and all that, to getting into the studio, to recording, to the episode coming out. You want it to be a really great process, because I find the better it is for you and the guest, it builds really good synergy, but also your listeners will be able to feel and tell that is the case as well.
Nice. Yeah, agreed. I think if I was being a guest on a podcast and I turned up and it was like a Teams link or something, my heart would sink.
I recently recorded on Google Meet, and I was like, is this a recording? And they're like, yeah. I was like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, well, like Zoom is okay. I use Zoom as a backup because there are a few options for the audio quality and things, but yeah, Meet and Teams aren't on it. But yeah, Riverside is one I recommend as well. It does the job. And then finishing up, I could ask you loads more questions about your journey and everything, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to ask you one more question. If there was something all those years ago that you could have known that would have made the podcasting journey and the journey with PodMatch a bit easier, what would that have been?
To talk to my listeners more. When I first got started, it took me a while to get the courage to even ask my listeners to engage with me. I liked my podcast I was doing, but I was scared to actually hear real feedback because I was fragile about it. Like it felt like my baby, and I didn't want anyone to even hint at it being ugly, right? Like I couldn't stomach that. But when I finally got the courage, and it took me years to actually start talking to my listeners, and what I did is I did 10-minute Zoom calls with them. So 10-minute video conference calls, just, hey, I got a few questions. I was just asking them, like, how'd you find the podcast? Was one of the questions. What do you like about it most? What's one thing we can make better together for future listeners? And what are you struggling with? Those are the 4 questions I started asking everybody. And I got those questions from people much smarter than me. But I started asking those, I realized that I had been missing huge opportunities. The very first thing I learned is my podcast was too long. I'm not saying all podcasts are, but my show, people were listening to on a commute. This is going back pre-COVID times when everyone went to work. my podcast was longer than 35 minutes. And everyone on average, it seemed to be like, that's how long they would like it to be. And the data showed they were right. And I would have never dove into that had I not had that conversation. So me now talking to younger Alex, I say, Alex, ask those 4 questions as soon as you possibly can. Meet every listener you can and talk to them about this, because the more you are in tune with who's listening to your show, the better your show can be created for them and to serve them on that journey of transformation that they're on.
Awesome. Yeah, we've talked about sort of getting feedback, but actually getting on calls with listeners, I think that's a completely new idea for this podcast. Just quickly, was there anything that you incentivized with them with, or were they just happy to talk to the host?
It's funny you mention that, because I thought that I needed some sort of incentive, but it turns out I didn't. People had been listening to the show and they were just excited to get the opportunity to talk to the host. And a lot of them were actually asking to take screenshots and they were posting it. Like, not that I was a celebrity or anything like that, but you think about it, like, as a podcast host, you are impacting somebody's life who's listening. People like to share good stuff. I talked about that earlier. People they're happy to do that. So there was no trade-off. It was just 10 minutes. And I didn't just ask them, it wasn't all business. I was like, cool, thank you for your time. Bye. It was like, hey, how long have you been listening? What do you do? Tell me about yourself. And so it became a friendship in many ways. And some of the people that I talked to years ago, I still talk to now, because we kind of built that relationship. They started by listening to my podcast, and it changed into so much more by them helping me make it better.
Yeah, and the best thing about that is that those people who accept, that they're going to be the ideal listener that you want to clone anyway, because they're the ones willing to give you time. So definitely something to think about for listeners. If you haven't really spent any time getting feedback from listeners, then maybe add a little clip into the end of your podcast or in the middle, or put a social post out just offering for 10-minute Zoom call. Nice one. Okay, well, I really appreciate your insight there. Huge amount of useful stuff around guesting if anyone's struggling to find or retain the right guests. And like Alex said, if you go to podmatch.com/EP, that's EP, /319, you can hear the episode where I was a guest on Alex's podcast talking about how to make your audio the best that it can be on a budget. Yeah,
Joe, I really encourage everyone to check that out, because we talked about a lot of stuff here today that I think most of it's very instantly practical, which is what I love, except for maybe when we talked about leveling up your studio, like your microphone, your sound, your video. And I think that that's a great next step, because it kind of goes a lot deeper than we were able to today. And I think that'll help somebody with the one thing we shared that maybe wasn't extremely practical. It can be. So I appreciate you being on my show again. And thank you for having me today, man. This was really just a great time. You're awesome at this. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. We'll be back next time with another conversation offering more insights to take your podcast to the next level and help you to achieve success. Happy podcasting.